The chandeliers of the Fairmont Olympic glittered above me, throwing golden light across gowns and tuxedos. Waiters moved in perfect rhythm with trays of champagne, and a string quartet played a polished rendition of Vivaldi near the stage. I sat at a round table pushed against the far wall, my place card tucked discreetly between tall vases of white lilies. No one looked in my direction. That had become the pattern of my life, being there, but never really seen. All attention belonged to Caleb and Savannah, standing beneath the arch of roses at the front of the ballroom. My son looked proud in his tailored navy suit, his arm firm around Savannah's waist. She was luminous in emerald silk, her hair swept into a bun that revealed diamond earrings glinting as fiercely as her smile. They had rented the entire ballroom for their anniversary, and the guest list read like a page out of Seattle's Business Journal. Venture capitalists, politicians, tech founders, people who spoke of acquisitions the way others spoke of football scores. When Caleb tapped the microphone, the chatter stilled. He held Savannah's hand aloft, the two of them a tableau of wealth and power. "Tonight," he said, his voice deep and measured, "I want to honor the woman who makes everything possible. Savannah, you've been my partner, my confidant, the heart of this family, and it's time the world knows what you mean to me." The audience leaned in. I felt my shoulders tighten. Bracing without knowing why, a waiter slipped behind me with a tray, and I caught the faint scent of truffle oil. Caleb reached into his jacket pocket and drew out a velvet box. Gasps circled the room when he opened it to reveal a diamond ring so large it seemed unreal under the chandelier's glow. "This," he said, "is just a symbol of my devotion." He slid it onto Savannah's hand, and the crowd broke into applause. She raised her fingers to the light, letting the stone catch every flash of camera phones. But my son wasn't finished. He lifted a folder from the podium. Sleek black leather embossed with gold lettering. "Along with this," he announced, "I've signed over $75 million in company shares to Savannah. She deserves to own what she's helped me build." The applause swelled again, chairs scraping as guests rose to their feet. I stayed seated. I knew those shares knew they had come from the company Richard, my late husband, had spent his life creating. Richard used to say he was building it for our family, for Caleb's future, for stability after he was gone. Never once had he said it was meant for Caleb alone, or for Savannah to claim like a crown jewel. Then Caleb produced one last gift, as if the ring and shares had been only an overture. He beckoned a notary forward, and tonight, as a final token, I present the deed to our new home, a waterfront estate in Medina. Gasps again, louder this time. He held up the deed, embossed with official seals. "Savannah, the mansion is yours." The audience erupted, champagne glasses clinking, cheers rolling through the ballroom like a wave. Savannah pressed a hand to her chest, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes, perfectly timed for the photographers. Caleb leaned down and kissed her cheek, and the crowd roared with approval. From my table, the distance between us felt immeasurable. I folded my hands in my lap and kept my eyes fixed on the stage, my chest heavy with a mixture of pride, sorrow, and something darker I dared not name. I remembered late nights working double shifts so Caleb could finish college. Remembered Richard telling me to trust the future. And now, in front of strangers dressed in sequins and silk, my son had handed it all away without a glance toward me. I stayed silent. But inside, a question pulsed louder than the music, pressing against my ribs until it hurt. When your own child gives away everything you built, what place is left for you? I used to think family dinners would be where I belonged most. Back in the Bellevue house, Richard at the head of the mahogany table, Caleb on his right, Savannah, not yet his wife, but already seated like she owned the space. The table gleamed under the chandelier. Crystal glasses lined up like trophies. Conversations always flowed around me. Never through me. Richard tried. In his way. He would ask if I was comfortable, if I needed more potatoes or a refill of wine. And sometimes he would redirect the chatter when Caleb grew too smug or Savannah too dismissive. But even his efforts couldn't shift the current. The others had decided my voice was background noise. Not worth pausing for. When Richard died, the shield vanished, and the silence that replaced him grew heavy enough to smother. I remember the years before Caleb's success, when every bill felt like a wall closing in. I took tutoring jobs in the evenings, grading papers at the kitchen counter until my eyes blurred. I clipped coupons and stretched grocery lists, learned how to make a single chicken last 3 meals. Caleb never noticed the quiet sacrifices he only saw. The result: tuition checks delivered on time, textbooks stacked on his desk, a dorm room paid for without complaint. Richard had worked hard at the company, but it was me who kept our household running when he traveled. Me who filled the gaps when the numbers didn't balance. I carried the invisible weight so Caleb could rise without feeling the ground shift beneath him. By the time Savannah appeared, polished and ambitious, I had grown used to shrinking in my chair, her laugh carried down the table, her opinions accepted like scripture, while mine fell flat before they left my lips. Richard would squeeze my hand sometimes under the tablecloth, as if to remind me he saw me. But when he was gone, no one else looked. At the gala tonight, watching Caleb hold Savannah's hand aloft, I felt the same hollow quiet as those dinners. It was the echo of a truth I had lived for years. The louder others became, the more invisible I became. How many small silences does it take before your voice disappears completely? The first time I realized I was no longer part of Caleb's inner circle, it was summer. He and Savannah had rented a house at Lake Chelan, inviting friends for boating and wine tastings. I saw the photos later on social media, Caleb grinning on the dock, Savannah in her wide-brimmed hat, arms linked with other couples. My phone had stayed silent. No invitation, not even a mention. When I asked him gently why he hadn't told me, he replied with a shrug. We figured you wouldn't be comfortable. It was more of a young crowd thing. That winter, the silence grew louder. I woke early on Christmas morning, expecting the old rhythm of stockings and cinnamon rolls. Instead, my living room stayed empty. I learned later Caleb and Savannah had hosted at their house, gathering her family and a few of his colleagues. We wanted to keep it simple, he explained afterward, as though excluding me from the one holiday we'd always shared was a matter of efficiency. Savannah had her own ways of pressing the knife. Over coffee one afternoon, she smiled sweetly and suggested, "You'd be happier if you downsized. That Bellevue house must feel overwhelming. Maybe something smaller, closer to a retirement community." The words were smooth, practiced, but the intent was sharp. I wasn't supposed to hold on to anything home, tradition, or place at the table. For a long time, I told myself these were oversights, the inevitable distance that grows as children build their own lives. But the pattern was too precise, too consistent. Vacations without me, holidays rebranded, even family friends forgetting to call. It was as if a quiet campaign had been waged, one that erased me politely, efficiently, until my absence looked natural. At the gala tonight, as I watched Savannah raise her diamond-ringed hand, I finally understood it had never been thoughtlessness. It had been design all along. What happens when erasure isn't accidental, but deliberate? The clinking of glasses quieted as Caleb returned to the microphone. His voice carried across the ballroom with the practiced ease of a man used to admiration. "Savannah," he said, gazing at her as though the rest of us were invisible. You are the heart of the Ashford family. Everything I've built, every success I've achieved, has been because of you." The audience broke into applause, long and generous, the kind that warms a speaker into believing his own myth. I sat motionless, my hands pressed together in my lap, my heart pounded, though not with pride. I heard the words as though they were stones tossed into deep water, each one dragging me further down. Savannah beamed, turning to kiss Caleb on the cheek, her diamond flashing in the light as if to underline his declaration. I must have shifted in my seat, because Caleb's eyes flicked toward me. The smile stayed on his face. But when he leaned closer to the microphone, his words slid like a blade. "And tonight is about joy, not old grudges. Let's all enjoy ourselves without distractions." It was directed at me, though no one else seemed to notice. A warning, a reminder to stay quiet, to stay small. My cheeks burned, and I stared down at the white linen tablecloth, my breath catching in my chest. For decades I had obeyed that silent command, "Don't ruin it, don't draw attention, don't embarrass him." But the weight of it now pressed harder than ever, almost unbearable. The applause swelled again as the string quartet shifted into another triumphant melody. People rose with their glasses, laughter ringing through the hall. I remained seated, my fists clenched beneath the table, the rage and humiliation coiling so tightly inside me that I thought I might finally shatter. And then I saw him, a tall man in a dark suit, moving steadily through the crowd. His eyes fixed not on the stage but on me. He cut between waiters and guests as though nothing around him mattered. When he reached my table, he bent slightly, slid a sealed envelope across the polished wood, and whispered low enough for only me to hear, "It's time to finally tell them who you really are." For a moment, I could not move. The envelope lay against the white tablecloth like a foreign object, heavy though it could not have weighed more than an ounce. My fingers trembled when I picked it up. The man straightened, his expression steady, his voice measured. "My name is Thomas Keene," he said. "I was Richard's partner in the firm before he passed. He left instructions with me. Tonight was the moment he chose." I opened my mouth, but no words came. Richard had never spoken of this. The stranger's presence, the envelope in my hands, felt like the crack of thunder after years of still air. Keene inclined his head slightly. "It's time to finally tell them who you really are." Then he stepped back, disappearing into the crowd as quickly as he had appeared, leaving me staring at the seal pressed into the paper. I hesitated, half afraid of what it might contain. For so long, I had been treated as though I was nothing more than a shadow. What if the contents confirmed it? My hands betrayed me, tearing open the flap even as my heart begged me to stop. The first page was crisp, official, stamped with the notary's seal. My eyes scanned the words, stumbling, then catching. It was a trust agreement, dated 3 years before Richard's death. The controlling shares of Ashford Timber, the Medina property, and several accounts I had never known existed were placed not in Caleb's name, not in Savannah's, but in mine. I pressed a hand to my mouth, the paper quivering in my grip. For years, I had believed Richard left everything to Caleb out of duty, tradition, expectation. But here, in black ink, was proof that he had seen something different. He had seen me at the back of the packet. A smaller folded sheet slipped free. Richard's handwriting covered the page, strong and familiar. My eyes blurred as I read, "Maribel, if you are holding this, it means I am gone, and it means the time has come. I know Caleb's brilliance, but brilliance without humility turns to arrogance. I know Savannah's charm, but charm without loyalty becomes hunger. I chose you because you know sacrifice. You understand what it means to build when no one is watching, to give without praise. That is what will preserve what I began. Do not doubt yourself. Everything I built belongs to you. I gripped the letter, my chest tightening. Memories rushed back, nights of balancing the household accounts, mornings of walking Caleb to school, evenings of waiting for Richard to return from meetings. He had seen me after all those years of invisibility, and he had trusted me more than anyone else. Tears pricked my eyes. But behind them rose something stronger, anger that Caleb had stood at the microphone moments ago, parading wealth as if it were his birthright, while Richard's true will sat sealed until now. I folded the papers carefully, pressing them against my lap. Hidden from view, around me, the gala continued. Laughter, music, applause, but none of it touched me. All I could feel was the weight of what Richard had given me and the fire beginning to burn in my chest. If proof of your worth finally arrived, would you hide it or reveal it in front of everyone? I held the papers against my lap, my fingers clutching the envelope as though it were the only thing keeping me from vanishing into the crowd. The music swelled, glasses clinked, and Caleb laughed from the stage, his hand wrapped tightly around Savannah's. He looked untouchable, triumphant. For years, I had stayed silent. I had told myself silence was survival, that speaking would only make me smaller in their eyes. Yet Richard's words burned through me now, stronger than the music, stronger than the applause. You understand sacrifice. That is what will preserve what I began. The memory of him at our kitchen table surfaced. His tie loosened, his voice low after another tense dinner. Pride destroys legacies. He had warned, what lasts is humility, and the strength to act when no one else will. I had thought he meant Caleb. Only now did I realize he had meant me. The master of ceremonies called for another toast, inviting everyone to raise their glasses once more to Caleb and Savannah. Laughter rippled, champagne sparkled under the chandeliers, and I knew this was my moment. If I waited, the chance would pass, and silence would reclaim me. I rose slowly from my chair. My knees trembled, but my steps steadied as I pressed the envelope against my chest. The crowd barely noticed me at first, too consumed by their celebration. I wove through the tables, each step heavier, but more certain than the last. When Caleb saw me, his smile widened, but not with affection. It was the smirk he used to wear at the dinner table when he mocked my questions, when he knew I would never push back. He believed I was walking forward to praise him, to confirm the story he had built for himself. I mounted the first step to the stage, the envelope firm in my grasp. Caleb extended his arm as if to guide me to the microphone, confident I would play the role I had always played, the quiet mother who existed only to applaud him. But this time, I felt something shift inside me, a weight lifting as another, heavier truth took its place. When silence has defined your life, can one voice truly overturn it? I stepped onto the stage, the weight of hundreds of eyes pressing against my back. Caleb leaned toward the microphone. His smile sharpened into a warning. Mother, why don't you say a few words? Keep it short. Though we don't want to slow the celebration, I gripped the envelope tighter, the paper crinkling beneath my fingers. My voice shook at first, but the words came anyway. This moment belongs to me. The ballroom froze. Glasses stopped mid-air. Laughter cut short. The quartet faltered to silence. Caleb blinked, confusion flickering before anger tightened his jaw. "What are you doing?" he hissed. Though the microphone carried his words across the room, I drew out the documents, raising them high enough for the nearest rows to see the stamped seals. These are the trust papers Richard left. They name me, not Caleb, not Savannah as the controlling heir of Ashford Timber, the Medina estate, and the accounts tied to our family's legacy. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Guests craned their necks, whispering to one another, the shock rolling through the ballroom like a tide. Savannah's practiced smile slipped, her hand frozen on Caleb's arm, her eyes narrowing with panic. Caleb lunged toward me, his face flushed. That's absurd. She doesn't know what she's holding. This is a mistake. He reached for the papers, but I pulled them close against my chest. No mistake, I said, my voice firmer now. Richard trusted me because he knew arrogance would consume this family if left unchecked. He knew humility preserves a legacy, not spectacle. Savannah's voice cracked as she tried to recover. She's confused. Richard never would have. A calm, steady voice cut through her protest. Thomas Keene stepped forward from the crowd, his presence commanding. I witnessed Richard's signature myself. These documents are valid under Washington state law. Mrs. Ashford is the rightful trustee. The room buzzed again, louder this time. Some guests exchanged approving nods. Others looked at Caleb with unease. A few slipped quietly toward the exits, unwilling to be caught in the fallout. Caleb's fury boiled over. You will hand those papers to me. Now, do you understand? You are embarrassing yourself. You are embarrassing me. His voice cracked on the last word, the mask of control slipping. I straightened, my hands steady at last. No, Caleb. For years, I stayed silent while you mistook cruelty for strength and indulgence for love. That silence ends tonight. The murmurs swelled, the tide turning. For the first time in my life, I felt the room listening not to him, not to Savannah, but to me. My words carried farther than I had ever imagined they could. Caleb's face hardened, but the authority he had always wielded now slipped through his fingers. Savannah lowered her eyes, her ring catching the light as if mocking her. I held Richard's letter close, his words echoing in my mind. I was no longer the forgotten one. I was the heir, the steward, the voice of this family's future. When power shifts in an instant, who will stand with you and who will turn against you? The silence that followed my words was broken, not by applause, but by Caleb's outburst. His face twisted with rage as he slammed the microphone onto the podium. This isn't over, he spat, before shoving past the stunned guests and storming out of the ballroom. The doors swung shut behind him with a force that rattled the chandeliers. Savannah hesitated only long enough to plaster on one last brittle smile, as if she could still salvage the night. But whispers moved faster than she could. I watched the shift in faces around her: admiration replaced by doubt, envy replaced by quiet judgment. She tightened her shawl around her shoulders and hurried after Caleb, her heels striking sharp against the marble. For the first time all evening, I did not shrink into myself. I stood steady on the stage, the papers firm in my hand. The weight of Richard's letter pressed close to my heart. The room no longer looked through me. Eyes met mine, some curious, some supportive, others wary. But they saw me, not the forgotten woman in the back, not the widow left behind, but the one Richard had entrusted with everything. The applause began slowly, a few hands clapping from the front rows, hesitant at first. Then it spread, filling the hall with a sound I had never heard directed at me. It was not the roar Caleb had demanded, nor the shallow cheers Savannah had curated. It was recognition. Later, when the ballroom emptied and the musicians packed their instruments, I stepped outside into the Seattle night. The air was sharp with salt from Puget Sound. The city lights stretched across the dark water. I breathed deeply, the cold filling my lungs, and for the first time in years, I felt the air was mine to claim. The legacy was mine now. But so was the burden. Richard's trust was not just a gift, it was a responsibility. And as the wind pressed against me, I understood something I had always overlooked: being underestimated is not the same as being powerless. When the table is finally yours, who do you still allow a seat beside you?